To the UK now, where up to 750,000 public sector workers are preparing for industrial action. They're voicing their opposition to planned changes to their pensions and pay, both part of the government's austerity measures there. A third of schools are expected to close, with court hearings postponed and UK airports bracing themselves for disruption. RT's Irina Galushka is in London.
This is the biggest mass action day in a decade in London. About 750,000 people are expected to turn up for these protests. Teachers, faculty members of colleges, college students are all expected to turn up to express their condemnation of the recent pension cuts which are planned by the government. Now, as far as we know, it's not just the college students and pupils and teachers that are in strike, although we do have to say that about 90% of London schools are expected to be closed today. Also, there are expected to be long delays at the airports because customs and immigration officials are also striking as well. All of these people are demanding that the cuts would not be processed, that the government does not go along with the cuts. They do say that they do want to retain their dignity. They do not want to work longer hours, get paid less.
We're going to have to pay more for our pension, get less pension, and work for more years. So some teachers will be working till they're 68, who were expected to work till they were 61.
The cuts are being made in the wrong directions. They are not being made towards the individuals responsible for the current financial crisis. Those most responsible for our current predicament have been left largely untouched, and the government seems to be rewriting the terms of certain agreements halfway through without due consultation of the people most involved.
The changes that they're making to the pensions, although they're necessary, it's way too drastic. So I think although we do need to make cutbacks in certain things, I think cutting the teacher pensions by so much is too much.
We're not expecting any significant disturbances other than, of course, the possible traffic disturbances which could take place. At the same time, there are organizations such as the Education Activist Network who have called on people to turn Thursday into a day of rage against the Tory-led coalition, so they may be the ones who may get a little bit rowdy. At the same time, we also must not rule out the fact that anarchists might also take to the streets and make some damage to the city. But other than that, people are expected to protest peacefully. Again, it's 250,000 people that are going to be marching from the centre of London towards the Parliament to make their voices heard and to protest the pension cuts which are planned by the government.
Political activist Professor Chris Knight says that the industrial action is a response to the government's mishandling of the financial crisis.
What's happening here is that a crisis caused by bankers and who've got the politicians in their pocket those politicians are making us pay as if hard-working teachers, hard-working civil servants, hard-working lecturers and others are responsible for this crisis. We all know that's not true. So let's deal with the problem at its roots. Let's crack down on what I regard as actually electoral fraud and criminal activity. We have already seen that this government is actually very weak. I mean, nobody voted for it. That's to start with, and it has already made a couple of U-turns. So we definitely think we can force a U-turn on this one. And what's going to happen, of course, is that it's not going to be just white-collar workers. We're building towards, it looks as if the government doesn't back down, we're building towards something absolutely enormous. We're building towards something we haven't seen in this country since 1926, a general strike. And that's going to be very powerful, and the government will fall if it comes to that.
The Greek Parliament has endorsed the latest austerity measures put forward by Prime Minister George Papandreou. Amidst violent protests, Papandreou gained a parliamentary majority to secure his 5-year austerity plan. This paves the way for Athens to obtain more international aid, avoiding default.
More violent protests in Athens on streets surrounding the Greek Parliament. But demonstrators weren't able to change lawmakers' minds about the latest austerity measures, and they were passed. By agreeing to a €28 billion 5-year package of fresh tax rises, spending cuts and privatisations, Greece is part of the way towards securing the next €12 billion instalment of financial aid. Without it, Greece looks set to become the first Eurozone country to default on its debt. But the government's still looking weak, and there's a risk lawmakers could vote on Thursday against separate elements of the plan. European stock markets climbed even ahead of the vote on hopes the package would be passed, and they retained those gains afterwards. But traders in Frankfurt say the vote doesn't change much in the long term.
Where is the Greek business model for the next couple of years? It's still missing, and that's the main problem. And I guess we have only a time-gaining measure today, nothing else.
And analysts warn that Greece's troubles have reignited concerns about the Eurozone sovereign debt crisis.
The moment Greece receives debt forgiveness, which it will have to receive at some point because it simply has too much debt and it's an unsustainable situation, at that moment the question of Ireland and Portugal will come into focus as well. Portugal, arguably the next one standing in terms of restructuring. Ireland could still grow out of problems by itself, but of course the voters in none of these countries will stand for too much austerity measures if Greece gets the easy way out, as they will perceive it to be.
And these are the challenges facing the international community. Preventing Greece from defaulting, which could possibly lead to a collapse of Europe's banking system, is just one battle as the EU looks to get Greece and other indebted Eurozone countries back on the road to recovery.
Hello everyone, welcome to Global Government News. Today is Thursday, June 30th, 2011, and I'm Darko. This is my website, ggnonline.com. That's ggnonline.com. If you want to, you can join me on Facebook, network blogs all the way down here at the bottom. And we're going to start off with the economy. And Wall Street rallies fourth day gains in July. Scene says U.S. stocks ended a volatile quarter on Thursday, their biggest four-day rally since September, as positive economic data, positive for some people, I guess, and temporary resolution of Greece's debt crisis indicated further gains in July, so it's all hindering on that. European stocks end June with gain. European stocks ended June on a strong note amid better than expected U.S. data and a second positive vote in Greece on an austerity plan. So, next we have Euro at 3-week high, ends June, and second quarter higher. Than moving on to commodities as usual. Commodities again taking a hit. Corn was one of the biggest ones. It says here though, Brent crude was down 60 cents. Then heating oil up $1.16. Natural gas up 59 cents. Moving down here to agriculture, we have basically coffee up $4.90. Cocoa up $32. Cotton down $2.80. Wheat down 60, wheat again down 56, and moving down to metals here for copper. Copper's up $5.85, trading at $428. Gold at $1,502.80 an ounce, down $7.60. Then silver up a little bit at $34.83. And we have gold falls on Greece. Optimism ends quarter two up and 5%. Gold fell on the last day of the quarter on Thursday as hopes that Greece would avoid a debt default eroded safe haven interest, but secured an 11th consecutive quarterly gain on global economic uncertainty. Then again on corn, U.S. corn futures plummet on USDA reports. This I thought was kind of crazy, because you have all this speculation on that. Future prices for U.S. corn plummeted after federal forecasters reported larger than expected supplies and raised their outlook for the fall harvest. I don't know how they do that though, because there's just so much rain. I don't see how they're going to have a larger than expected harvest with all these floods and rains. But hey, maybe they're right, or maybe they're just trying to screw over the farmers like they usually do. Britain has second cheapest gas in the European Union. Only consumers in Luxembourg enjoy lower gas prices than Britons, according to statistics from the European Union. Then the London Telegraph, Lloyds Banking Group to cut 15,000 jobs in an effort to save $1.5 billion, and the group has put the lender on a collision course with workers' unions after saying the bank would have cut 15,000 jobs if it is to return to profitability, while HSBC also announced a cut of 700 jobs. Banks under fire over job cuts. Two of Britain's biggest banks come under fire from unions today after announcing plans to cut thousands more jobs in the industry. Go in there and check that out. Links will be posted, and my YouTube channel is ddarko2012, so you can go and check that out. I have plenty of playlists. Goldman Sachs warns of layoffs. It says here they've notified the New York State Department of Labor that the investment bank could lay off 230 employees, citing economic reasons. job cuts inevitable, and UK News International, Britain's News International group of newspapers, will slash dozens of its 3,000 employees as the components of the group begin to share resources, media reports. Then we have this, AECL sales mean up to 900 layoffs. And it says here the employees are bracing for up to 900 layoffs as details emerge about likely job cuts in the wake of federal government's deal with SNC-Lavalin. Japan's auto production slumps 30.9%. And it said that was in May from a year earlier, making the 8th straight month of decline as the March 11th twin disasters disrupted supply chains. And so everything is going according to plan, according to the powers that be, because, if you don't go into IMF receivership, or you don't accept their economy, their economic system, if you don't submit, who knows? Maybe you'll get buzzed by a bad earthquake and then a tsunami and a nuclear disaster. Who knows, But I wouldn't test them, because you'll have stuff like that happen. And it's called economic warfare and then weather warfare, but weather warfare is a means to economic warfare. It says here, South Korea lower economic growth outlook to 4.5% for this year. Then Monsanto, yay, everybody clap for Monsanto, raises forecast as net gains 77% on herbicide sales. Said the largest seed company raised its full-year profit forecast and posted third quarter earnings that topped analysts' estimates on higher sales of Roundup weed killer, which we just talked about causes infertility, and genetically modified seeds, which also causes people to become basically sterile. So good job, eugenicist company. It says here, Daimler to invest 2 billion euros to expand its Chinese joint venture. And it said they signed an agreement with a Chinese partner to invest 2 billion euros in their joint venture in the Chinese capital, allowing Mercedes to expand production of compact luxury SUVs, said the Chinese company on Wednesday. Apple had its worst first half since 2008 as buyers await the iPhone. Then China's local government, trillions in the red. It says, in a time of severe global economic recession, Chinese economy has grown to become the second largest in the world by most measures, but China's debt is also growing. It says in the report to the National People's Congress on Monday, China's National Audit Office said that the local government debt has swelled to 10.7 trillion won, that's more than $1.6 trillion, and that's equivalent to more than a quarter of the country's GDP. Carbon currency, a new beginning for technocracy. And he said, critics who think the US dollar will be replaced by some new global currency are perhaps thinking too small. And they're talking about carbon currency that's based on energy production and consumption instead of price. Then we have this ASEAN hold conference towards green economy in Vietnam, so they're definitely pushing for it everywhere at these summits. And that government under fire as alliance plans to launch anti-carbon tax campaign. Moving on here, Harrods stops taking checks. Harrods in the London department store will stop accepting checks at the end of this week, becoming the last major retailer in Britain to do so. Then next, Canada's housing bubble deemed close to bursting. Then here we go, move down here. Unemployment, no extended benefits for people laid off from now on. So bad news. It says here, a huge number of Americans believe the economy has now entered permanent decline from the Business Insider, and Minnesota braces for shutdown as budget talks stop. Now, in Cook County, $108 billion total debt amounts to $63,525 per household in Chicago and $32,000 for suburban residents. Iraq, the true cost of the war on terror, $3.7 trillion and counting, and up to 258,000 lives. For sale, coastline ports, Olympic venues, and banks. So the selling off, there you go. Then recession-related crimes rising in the UK. Parental child abductions hike in the UK as well. It says here, U.S. veterans forced to pay parts of their medical care. Then pensioner, 82, left to die in his wheelchair while frail wife lay on the floor after social service carers failed to call on them for 3 days. Next up, South Australian families to be slugged by $1,200 services from today. It says here, China raises income tax threshold, then private sector lending increases in May after stalling. U.S. must hike debt limits soon to avoid shocks as IMF. So now they're pushing us around. It says here, Guy Thermal's departing the Treasury after he sells Americans out. It says here, IMF taps French Lagarde as new managing director. Egypt rejects IMF conditions. And that's why you have now the news about Clinton in the U.S. basically having talks with the Muslim Brotherhood, so that either El Baradi or the Muslim Brotherhood will go in there and do what they need to do. because that's what it's all about. Not democracy, but force and coercion. This is GGN. Thank you.